the way, did you get a chance to test the?
Yes, all done. It works. And I don't want to do it again because there's some spoilers.
Okay.
So.
I don't know if you have been here. I don't think you've been here since we started.
No, not here.
Live
Yeah,
streaming.
yeah.
Okay, for sure. All right. With the live streaming, the people who are in Spokane, because they put together like a live streaming thing, and there's also people who just tune into us on YouTube.
Oh, really?
They can hear you.
Okay.
But they can't hear them at all. So either we need to have you repeat the question.
Remind me to do that,
right.
or there's some mics over there.
Mics, and give the sound folks a chance to understand that that's what you're doing.
But everybody should move forward. This is not a spectator sport. Y'all are going to get involved, and you will be on camera.
And I was mentioning this to Carolyn. People tend to show up right at noon.
Yeah.
And I do a longer intro because I talk about what's coming up, and so I tend to start right at noon and talk for a little bit. But it gives people a chance to get their food.
Cool.
Filter in.
Cool. Yeah.
Cool. Right.
Awesome.
Well,
Thank you.
Awesome.
So if you've ever been to a TV show, especially Jay Leno or one of the talk shows, somebody comes out and warms up the audience. And usually there's somebody funny, because people come in, they're standing outside, or you come to a meeting and everybody's head is someplace else, and it helps them get present. Unfortunately, I'm not really funny. And this is where everybody chuckles, because that was sort of funny. And I think it was Lady Gaga who said, she did a great intro for Saturday Night Live of things that are funny, where people go, oh, that's kind of heartwarming, and they applaud, and then they actually do something funny, and she goes into art pop, which was a really cool way of doing it. So I try to learn from other people. You're never too old to learn. You're going to keep following me around, aren't you? Thank you. Good luck with that. I do pace, so remind me when you need me to. Get back in your cage.
Yeah. Do we need to stay in that
yes,
box?
I do.
Is that the deal? I never know how this
So
works.
when you're ready, let me know. I'll go get the clicker so I don't keep walking
Well, no,
off
it's
stage
totally
or off
fine.
camera.
Yeah, they're gonna. I suggested like we just do the collar that gives you a little snap when you walked outside.
Oh, good idea.
Yeah. I always find those really strange in real life because the fence isn't there.
Yeah.
In animals.
I would never do that to a dog. I'm fine with doing it to myself.
Sure.
Just
Check, check, check.
FYI.
Check, check. Check, check.
Okay.
Fundamentals, Martina Welkoff. Oh, okay. We are streaming? We're streaming.
Hello, YouTube.
Hello, YouTube.
Can we turn it around? Show all of
Show
people?
everyone?
Show
Yeah.
everyone.
Well, people will keep filtering in, actually.
I'm
So
sure they will.
if anybody, it looks like everybody has grabbed some lunch for the most part. The lunch is there for you. Please feel free to reach up and grab it and snack during the time. We'll have some time for questions at the end as well.
Lots of time. So
Fantastic.
yes, they give me 30 minutes. So
Fantastic. So you guys are here at CoMotion Labs. For those of you who aren't here because you work here, CoMotion Labs is an incubator on the University of Washington campus. We cater primarily to the University of Washington spinouts, but not entirely. We do have some companies that have come from other universities, and we have some spinouts that are just coming from downtown, from somebody making a new thing, and they want to come and be surrounded by smart, fun people. Maybe they want to be looking at hiring students. Maybe it's something else, but they come to the University of Washington and they make their startup here, and we're very excited. There's 3 of us, 3 incubators on the University of Washington campus. This one here focuses on physical engineering because we have lab space downstairs. There's one called Startup Hall that's over on Northeast Campus Parkway that focuses on IT and software. And then there's another one called CoMotion Labs at CoMotion HQ, which focuses on VR and AR. So if you are in any or all of these fields, come talk to us about where your company wants to live. Few things that are coming up next week. If you are university student, faculty, staff affiliated with the university in any way, you may be eligible. If you're one of those, you are eligible. If you're less affiliated, you may be eligible for the Amazon Catalyst program. This is an idea program where if you have a really good idea, you can get up to $100,000 to support that idea in $25,000 chunks over the course of time. It's really a great program. You get to keep the IP. It's a really interesting kind of system that was worked out by CoMotion to get things going in the Seattle ecosystem. So we're very excited about it. They are having, their next deadline is May 15th, which is way, way out there. But they have a meeting next week, Tuesday the 23rd from 5 to 6 p.m. over in the Hub, which is right up the hill here, to talk about how you can take your idea into an application. And so they really want to help people get their applications right and get their money. So that's great. So please consider signing up for that. It's on our events website. Next week in this space, we're going to have Martina Welkoff. She is going to be talking about Pitching 101. She has launched Convene VR and Zealist, and she's the board president of Seattle Women in Tech. She's a board member of Seattle Angel. She's great. So that's going to be fabulous. The Entrepreneurial Law Clinic, which is here at the University of Washington, sends lawyers in training over here to talk about legal things, and their senior attorneys come to answer any questions that the students can't answer. They're going to be talking about equity allocation next week. And then the following week, we're going to have Nat Burgess presenting on Start with the Exit in Mind, M&A Planning for Startups. If you've ever started a startup and you wanted to sell it later, there might be some things that you can do early on to make that easier. Burgess is the founder of TechStrat, and he's been an M&A advisor since 1989. He's worked on mergers with Google and Microsoft and Intel and Symantec. He's been an angel investor and startup mentor since 1994 and a lawyer since 1998. He's a really good speaker. I recommend him. And there isn't an there isn't an entrepreneurial law clinic group that day, so that's just going to be from 12 to 1. Today, after we are done with Lawrence Lerner, we will have the ELC here to talk about when do you hire a lawyer. We do have the ELC over here today. And if you don't know what the ELC is, they actually do startup advising. So if you need to perhaps limit your costs when talking to an attorney, we recommend at least checking out the Entrepreneurial Law Clinic over at the University of Washington. Today, we are extremely happy to have Lawrence Lerner speaking to us about startup leadership. Lawrence is a corporate entrepreneur who envisions and builds digital products and services across the globe. He has launched more than a dozen successful corporate products across many industries: retail, high tech, media and entertainment, IT services. He's launched them with Motorola, Catalina Marketing, Macrovision, DHL, Debenhams, just a huge variety of companies and products. He's an expert in, you name it, he's an expert in it: process engineering, strategy, enterprise architecture, big data, mobile, social media, IT security and product marketing. If you have a question, please be prepared to ask it, because he is a wonderful, wonderful source of information. Today, he is the CEO of R-Chain Holdings, a blockchain venture fund located here in Washington. He's helping to drive the ecosystem for a third-generation blockchain company capable of scaling to 40,000 transactions per second, provide public and private namespaces while reducing the overhead created by earlier blockchains, those early blockchains. We're just super excited to have him. Side note, I know that you know that they're talking about building more blockchain startups over at Startup Hall, right?
Yes.
Yes, more blockchain.
Looking forward to spending some time there.
Excellent. We're so
Great.
glad.
Thank you. I think they've got me mic'd.
Oh, they do have you mic'd.
Am I on? All right.
Set this down.
Okay. This is not a spectator sport, so y'all are going to participate. I've got a lot of slides, and I will talk about a lot of different things, but let's have a lot of questions. Let's make it interactive. Right? This is your time. So I said it's a journey planner. You know, when I was asked to do this, and I do a lot of talks on leadership and have run companies in all over North America, including Canada, Asia, and Europe. You know, leadership is something people look at, and they're so serious about it. And there's all this scholarly research, and I looked at it, I said, wow, if I had to take a class on this, I don't know that I could pass it. There's so much to do, right? So leadership, you know, and I'm going to go through these, and I'm fine if you ask questions while we're talking, and I'm going to pace because that's what I do, but I got to stay in the lines. It's a journey you take others with you. Leadership is something that you're looking at, right? You can't do it alone. You need at least one other person, right? In order to be leading, whether it's a company. And there's all kinds of leadership that I'm going to talk about today. You know, we're talking about entrepreneurs, we're talking about startups, and everybody thinks, you know, startups, they hear traditional tech or a product company. But maybe you're working in some social endeavor. Maybe it's for your religious organization. Maybe it's a social cause. Leadership is something that happens, and it's conscious choice. And it should always be a conscious choice that you're making. So as you're thinking about it, some things to go along with. And it's always not great to start with the downside, because leadership and command, right, if you're talking about it from a military standpoint, is a positive function. How do we go ahead? But I thought it was important. You know, the first one is there's a great man theory, right? He is a great leader because of some innate consciousness, some abilities that they've got. Well, first of all, that's kind of sexist. So we talk about a great person theory, right? That there's something that's innate and built into them. It's not true. As you look at leaders, people who have done things in history, in your own lives, your parents, you're led by them, by examples and by things they do and things that they've shown you. So it isn't something that's necessarily brought in. Leaders are born, not made. Leadership happens. Sometimes you're put in a situation, and I'll give you two very good examples, very memorable examples, of times when no one wakes up or grows up and says, at 3 years old, I want to be president. I want to be a state senator. I want to run, though maybe today, in today's world, we've got some people go, I want to run the next big Ethereum or blockchain, or I want to run Apple. This doesn't happen. These aren't a priori things that come to you, right? They're things that you learn, you pick up along the way, and they're preferences. They are choices you make. Power is taken, right? Some people say, well, if you want to lead, you've got to go and take it. Power and the ability to lead people is something you need to persuade them to do. You cannot go into an organization, and it probably doesn't last very long to say, I'm here, I'm in charge now. People in this country and in most can vote with their feet, they can resign, they can move on. It's not something that you take. It has to be granted, and you actually do need to convince people that you're adding value to what they're doing. Influence is derived from structure. This was a long-standing thing, and that structure in military organizations where you have a very top-down hierarchy, and we'll talk about examples where it is actually important to have that, but your influence isn't necessarily there. Anybody here a developer or technical? How would you be loud when you answer? How would you describe the developer community?
I don't know, heavily interconnected.
Okay. But what about in terms of leadership?
Tends to be flexible. Somebody will have an idea and drive that, and then someone else will have an idea and drive, taking turns.
People take turns, but it's usually a meritocracy. People gravitate towards really good ideas, and that isn't necessarily because of structure. In the open source community, where software is given away, there's some licensing constraints, and you're probably all familiar with open source software and use it every day, whether you know it or not. The community gets together and talks about how you build things, and the better ideas generally win, and people demonstrate competency amongst peers all over the world through technical merit. Leadership is qualitative and not quantitative. He or she makes me feel really good about being here. There's lots of people who make me feel good at being in places, but at the end of the day, whether it's a technical merit, right? We delivered a lot of code. We hit our numbers. We made our deadlines. We were able to do what we said we were going to do. And that person was able to attract an audience, raise funding, get the project done. It is very much a qualitative aspect. You should be, quantitative aspect. You should be able to put a number on it. How you measure it for your specific business or your specific cause, is dependent on the environment and the situation, right? They're not real people, right? But you will remember them. They're my favorite examples of leaders and heroes because they were forced into a situation. Bilbo, everybody knows the story or seen the movie, came out and accomplished a great deed, but he wasn't a great man. He didn't have a lot of skills. He had zero preparation. Ellen Ripley from Alien, for those of you who remember back in the day, there's a lot of you who don't remember because I'm getting blank looks. I'm showing my generation gap. Ellen Ripley was the original Alien movie. She was completely unprepared for the situation she was in. The aliens came, decimated the crew. She was the last survivor. She picked up things along the way, and she became the person who survived. So some differences, different thoughts about what leadership is and how you get there. And there's a couple of different traits. Autocratic, I'm the king. I get to make all the decisions. Everything comes from the top down. Democracy, we vote, we discuss it as a group. Laissez-faire, let's all kind of discuss it, talk about it, see what works. Is there ever a time, we have some ideas and preconceived notions about which of these are better. Can anybody tell me which is the best?
One that comes naturally.
What does that mean?
Some people have a predisposition and do a good job of being more hands-on control, and some people do a good job of facilitating coordination, and some people have an idea of getting a crowd to move as a crowd forward and not really have a leader in front.
That's a good idea. Those are actually really valuable. Would you want to live in a monarchy or work in an autocratic environment where you're in a company, you're all forming startups, you're part of startups, where the leader, the CEO, says to you, here's what I need you to do every day, and I need you to do this. I'm setting you up, by the way. I try to warn people when I do that. Anybody else have a thought on this? So, is there a time when autocracy works? Let's take a vote. Yeah, maybe by the time that happens. So it's very contextual. As leaders, you've got to look at the context. There are times when somebody's got to make a decision. There are times when you want to build consensus. And you're going to have to start picking up those skills and looking for contextual awareness of how you do them in that case. And by the way, if you're not comfortable with these, you don't have to be comfortable with all of them. And to your point, you may gravitate towards them naturally as a person, and you may grow into some of them. But really, it does, there are times when somebody's got to make a decision, and right then and there. And then it's not always that dramatic, but there are business decisions that you've got to make. We're cutting staff by 30%, or we're not going to be able to make payroll next month. And that happened here in Seattle. Like, you can look in the newspaper or online and see them. So that leadership comes in every size, shape, and form, and in every kind of, aspect. This is what we think of many times when we think of leadership. Some one person standing up there, very well dressed, very polished in there. But leadership is about motivation. It's a journey you take with other people. It's inspiration as a spiritual leader. It's getting the group to work together. And sometimes maybe you're just leading one person to get them somewhere. If you're not comfortable being the center of attention, every day people will call you or look at you and say, what am I supposed to do today? Where should I be going? And not because they need all of that explanation, all of the deep detail, but very often you got to be comfortable being the person that everybody looks to and they watch your actions as to what's happening on a day-to-day basis and how are you reacting. How do you react when situations are bad? When things are good and revenue is high, whatever your business is, and let's just take it in that business context. Revenue covers a multitude of sins. If everybody's making lots of money, there's lots to spread around, we can hire more people, we can do more things, it's easy. When things are tough, people look to you for stability and relevancy. Why am I relevant in my job? Why am I relevant in what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis? That's where they're looking for you to be part of their solution for that, and how you engage with them. So it isn't just that you hand out things, you stand isolated, but it's how do you work with the crowd and the group, and how do you interact with them? Environment plays heavily, right? The ship going over the waterfall is very different. But running each of these different kinds of businesses in different environments, how the people interact with you, how you as a leader interact, in the technical world, right? They're looking for that expertise. If you're running an environmental company or you're running something that has to do with forestry products, they're going to look for certain characteristics that move you forward or move forward in that. In industrial situations where things are tense, if you're a literal rock star, your fans look to you, and that's what we do today for that kind of leadership. They want answers, and how you go about that, is different. Be more than your LinkedIn profile. Who here is running a company or is in a leadership role, even leading a team, even a research team? How well do the people on your team know you? Can they tell you your favorite food? What's that? Right, and it isn't about knowing every personal detail, but people want you to be authentic, right? My LinkedIn profile is like, oh, he's done all these things, he's written this, and you get one dimension, maybe two dimensions of a person. But when you're interacting and you're looking for something, when times get tough, people are looking for you to give them something more, and they want to know how to engage with you. I find this happens very often. It happens with younger people, especially in previous generations. This one, not so much, which thank you for being able to speak up. People in certain organizational hierarchies, especially public, I could never talk to the CEO. They come into the elevator and I freeze. Steve Jobs was infamous for making people freeze. Smart man, tell me what you're doing in 90 seconds. Wow. It's intimidating. There's an expression, managed by walking around. Become social, right? It doesn't mean you need to be best friends, and there are times when that's a burden. But there are times when people know how to interact with you. What's the conversation? Not everything has to be about work. It isn't all fun. But what's that play, that interaction? How do you build culture? This is the first step of building it. And by the way, not only is it about you knowing them, it's about you understanding them and their motivations. Because to motivate people as a leader, just like there's 3 modes of learning, right? There are different ways, people learn by reading, by listening, and by actually kinesthetics, by doing things. How people are motivated and what they're motivated, some people are real simple. My motivation is my paycheck. My motivation is I've got a family. My motivation is I am going to change the world through technology or my social justice cause. And those are all valid things. Understanding them will make them perform better. It will make them happy, right? Part of your role is to improve their lives. Because if the company, the biggest asset most companies have is human capital. And until you start doing that and understanding the dynamics of yours, especially in startups where your team could be 2, 3, maybe 12, then when you get to 20 and 50, and you start having to let go, right? Because you start building a structure where other people are leading parts of it, understanding those dynamics are hard. This is, by the way, not something I can do in an hour, or half hour, or even 2 hours. This is a great course. Management versus leadership. Management is very structured, and it gets certain specific goals accomplished. Whether it's in the manufacturing world and say, hey, you know what we've learned over the last 50 years, that there are certain strategies to motivate people and to make assembly lines run faster. Construction, I learned this last night, is one of the only industries where productivity has gone down by 50% in the last 50 years. We've become highly inefficient as things have become more complex. Technology's not kept up, which is interesting. I saw a startup last night that had a great pitch for this. But they're very mechanical operations. And depending on the business you're in, especially if you're in a highly regulated industry, banking, pharmaceuticals, if you're building devices, they're FDA, those are things that you need to learn to manage people to deliver it. Leadership, right, is about figuring out how all of the parts go together in your industry, in your context. It's all about the things that you pick up along the way. Building some good foundational skills, right? I'm giving you a bunch of sort of platitudes and things to think about. There's a whole bunch more on my website. But it's about what you pick up along the way and how you as an individual make choices to use them and interact with them. And it goes back to that being center of attention. If you're not comfortable doing all of those things, there are other roles. And by the way, if you're sort of a truth or dare type thing, if you don't want to be the leader, that's okay. Especially if you get voted into it, elected into it, the team says we really want you, there may be times you do it for a short time. Or you may say, you know what, I'm happy being the researcher or sole contributor. I want to be part of the team, but I don't want to be the leader. That's okay. But when you decide to be the leader, be the leader. You've got to be there for people. I need 3 volunteers, real quick. I'll pick you. Come on down. If you don't volunteer, this is what the leader does. So you're all on camera now, broadcast live on YouTube, hundreds of thousands, right? We're up to like 1 million people watching. So team, this has been a good week, not a great week. I need you to come forward. Sorry, you're in the cage now. It's been a great week. We've got a lot of things accomplished. We lost the Starbucks deal. So I've got some announcements for next week. Thanks, and I'll see you all later. You can go. Oh, not you. So people are going to start laughing and freaking out. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. What's your reaction to that?
Very uncomfortable, not knowing everything whenever someone else.
Transparency is really important. There are times when you want to tell your team absolutely everything, and bringing people into the fold and having the conversation. So tell them everything or nothing. Because if you leave things unsaid, you're all smart people. Your mind is going to start going out there, and as a leader, you're creating speculation. You're inviting them. I mean, look how uncomfortable he is. He's the one who's saying it. It's like, I've got something really important to tell you. Get a promotion. We just merged with another company. There's an asteroid heading for us. Think about what you say as a leader, whether you listen or not, whether you believe it or not, whether people appear to be paying attention or not. I told my daughter a story slightly related to this. I was flying back from Prague, and I had met someone in the hotel lobby, and she was just beating up a coffee maker. She couldn't figure out how to make it work. She was being a very loud, ugly American, sort of like, this is so complicated. I hate it. Long story short, I showed her how to make it. I get home. I told the story to my then 14-year-old daughter. And I said, we are no longer going to be known as tourists when we go out. We're travelers. A couple of years later, I'm reading her college essay. So she's a teenager. Whatever, Dad. First paragraph is, we're a family of travelers. You never know what people are listening to, so be really mindful of that. Follow-up to that is, bad decisions can be reversed. We're going to buy 10,000 tons of rubber because we've got all these orders and I've got line of sight and the sales team has said, we're going to get this done. I don't know, should we buy the rubber? If you're standing there and being indecisive as a leader, and constantly indecisive, it sows doubt. Is our business viable? Was this a really good idea? This whole idea of putting cats online. $12 million worth of transactions a day for CryptoKitties. We're holding up $6 billion worth of Ethereum transactions. Anybody have a Tamagotchi? Beanie Babies? It seemed like a really good idea at the time, and they were. And people bought them. Slow things, when you're slow, when you're indecisive as the leader, it's okay to be pensive. It's also okay to say nothing and say, you know what? I need a week to think about this. You've set a deadline. You've made it very crisp for people. It makes sense. Do you listen or do you wait to speak? There's a huge difference. There's also active listening, and you're doing it right now, right? You're nodding, you're saying, I agree with that, your body language is good. When you're with your teams, when you're with clients, when you've got other people there, you want to show them you're all in, right? I hear what you're saying. I didn't understand that. Can I paraphrase that back to you? It's okay to have part of dialogue. If you're constantly interrupting, That's also bad. Listening to what people say. And by the way, if you don't know how to read body language, there are some really good books, and I should have thought of one before, but start understanding those nuances and understand a couple of things. One, everyone's body language is pretty much the same, but there are some subtleties. So there are lots of people here, and don't get self-conscious, who have folded arms, and usually in a meeting that's like, really? You don't sound terribly credible. Maybe, or maybe that's just the way they are. Get to know, this goes back to getting to know your team, getting to know all of the social interactions, because you're driving that. And believe me, people will start imitating your actions. Do it a couple of times. There are things that are in these slides. The last slide, I almost cried. There's a state senator that's starting to use, because I worked with her for a while. There was listen, and listening doesn't mean just with your ears. It means listening, watching how things are interacting, watching how things are going. Look at absenteeism. In large organizations, I worked with I ran a number of large companies with overseas staff, and you could tell when they weren't happy, people would be leaving because they had bad backs. We're a bunch of software developers. People were not coming down with back injuries from sitting over the computer too long. They were unhappy about something. Listen, see how it is, figure out how you're going to take care of things. You're all type A's. I'm taking that for granted. You have hard-charging personalities. You like it done, you like to get it right. Know when you're done. Because of perfection, there's no end. You can always write it better. You can add just one more tweak to that speech that you're going. You can get one more voter, and please go out and vote, to vote for whatever your cause is or whatever the election. Do remember that you are working with other people, and that's really key to get, to remember that you can overdo it. This is my personal mantra, right? Player, coach, whatever you want to call it. If you're not getting your hands dirty, there's generally two kinds of leaders, or there's hundreds of kinds of leaders, but you look at it in one way is there are people who are subject matter experts, and you had a really good idea, and you went out and did the work, whether it was research, business, sales, you sell cars, you build cars, and you bring in a team that supports you to scale and have other skills, right? Being able to show people that you're able to do the work, or when push comes to shove, you can get down and dirty and do whatever it means. And maybe that's writing a PowerPoint, or maybe the team is out really late trying to hit a deadline, and the best and only thing that you can do, because you're no longer technical or you're no longer this, is to go and get everybody dinner. And you come back and you sit down with them and they say, hey, we're here till 1 a.m, I'm in. That's getting your hands dirty and becoming part of the solution. Who's doing only one thing? One job, one part of your job. You've got multiple startups. Maybe you're doing a startup part-time. You have a family. You have other personal commitments. When you're here, be mindful, be here now. Which means you're not thinking about, right now I'm thinking about, I've got another interview at 2 o'clock that I'm going to be doing, and it's on blockchain, so that's going through my head, and then tonight I got to do this, and then I'm meeting a buddy for dinner. Be present. People notice. When you're in a meeting, when someone's talking to you, they've asked for your time. If you do office hours, or you go and see a professor or TA or an advisor here, you hate to see that they're sort of not present with you. So everything that you're doing, and when you're bringing in customers, clients, partners, be mindful about being very present. And people love that respect, that one-on-one attention that they're getting from you, because you are the leader. And people like to know, I got to spend 20 minutes with the head of, or the person who's building the company that, or the youngest this. You've really enriched their life by doing that, and that's a lot of respect. People may not say it, but they will remember it. Things go sideways. Not everybody's personality gels or meshes. And there's as type A's, it's like, I've got the solution. You're fired, you're gonna take his job. By the way, you're going back and you're gonna work on her job and she's gonna take over the division. What? If you don't wanna have knee-jerk reactions to things. Be thoughtful about it. Make sure that you know all of the background. And sometimes, right, you find people who are good workers or good, have great skills. There's some things that need time. We're not machines, right? We're not even plants. You can't prune us. You can't trim us back. You can change what people are doing, but if you think that person is valuable, regardless of what it is, and then of course the management side of that is, if you're going to cut someone and let them go, there is paperwork that needs to be done. You need to demonstrate why they should or shouldn't be in that role. You're in charge. You're mommy and daddy. You're responsible. And I'm not saying you're everybody's parent. When push comes to shove, at some point, you need to make a decision. And you need to be the one who is doing it. So be firm, not aggressive. Team, we're going to have to work this weekend. We've got a deadline. We're a little bit behind. This is a big deal for us. It's going to change the complexion of the company. I will be here with you, but we're all coming in Saturday and Sunday. People may not like it, but they will respect the fact, the way you presented it to them. Life is a journey, right? You've heard this 1,000 times. Internalize it. It's about what you pick up along the way. If you're just focused on the destination, or like, we're rich, and I'm going to spend money, like we've had our IPO or ICO and raised $30 million in 24 hours. Can't make this stuff up. It's really the journey and how you take people along with you, what you do. And by the way, you should be having a good time doing this, whatever it is, whatever the industry. And maybe you can be a great leader in another industry or in many industries, it doesn't matter. But be mindful that it is a journey, there are steps, there are pitfalls along the way. How you plan for it, and do your planning way ahead. 2/3 of your journey should be planned before you leave, and then the other third is for course corrections. Regulatory things come up. Somebody else comes up with a different product. Climate change, environment change, market change happens. So last slide. You don't need a catchphrase. I guess I somehow ended up with one. And this works in every situation. When things are bad, we're going ahead, onward. And I only put this in, right, and it's not to be self-promoting, but what I've noticed is those very simple things that when I'm leading, people use this very often in a number of organizations. As I said, I've got a state senator who's doing it, and sometimes they do it as an exclamation point because we've got something going on. It's really exciting. It's a lot of fun. We're going onward. We're always going ahead. So you as that leader are directing them. We're not saying, cheer up, it's going to be better, or aren't we awesome? Aren't I awesome? We're going onward. And that's what leadership is about, taking things forward. So I've talked for 40 minutes. I was going to plan on talking less. Let's go for questions. And either do the mic. And you can come up and grab the mic and ask questions, or I'll just repeat it. Nobody has a question? Yes, please.
I believe leadership has some, common things, no matter in politics or business. Can you comment on Trump's leadership?
Sorry, I didn't hear the last point.
Trump, the president leadership.
So you want me to comment on the president because you think leadership in business and in politics has some commonalities? Good starting question. See, this is breaking the ice. So people often believe they're doing the right thing. And maybe you know their motivations and maybe you don't. But when leaders are transparent and you've built, especially in today's world, a social identity, and I actually wrote an article about this on LinkedIn about the way candidate Trump and now President Trump tweets. You get an idea from what you've read, how you've interacted with people. So you look at those traits on how do they present to an audience? And that audience could be as big as the country, or it's actually the whole world. And what are the things that they do to back it up? Right? What have you done? It works exactly the same thing. What are the measurable results? And you've got to look very finely at those results and say, okay, here's the state of the country 1 year later. But let's look at the numbers. Let's look at the interaction between you, right, say it all or not at all, between you and other countries. And he's had some very opinionated things to say about other countries, which have created doubt. Slow decisions create doubt. Why aren't you going? Right or wrong, it created a lot of doubt in people's minds. So we can look at popular opinion polls. It's probably not a great and definitive answer, but in business, in government, in social justice causes, in spiritual causes, people want to see results and they want to feel relevant. Those are the key things that happen. You may not like it. There are lots of leaders. You know, I pick on Steve Jobs because Apple is such a great company that's done many good things. People have iconized him and idolized him. Dealing with him on a day-to-day basis, depending on who you were, could be, there are lots of books written about it. You can read about it. He got the job done. Overall, people stay at Apple for a really long time, as they do at Microsoft and other companies. Other questions? Yes, please.
Oftentimes, a lot of the stress in startup comes from quarrels, I guess, between the leadership roles. What are some things you look for in co-founders to help limit that kind of friction?
So there's stress in startups. What do you look for in co-founders? It's a good question. It's the same as any other business. It really is the same as any other business. The only thing is you notice more of the details because there are generally fewer people. So it's compatibility and communications. How well are you able to relate to each other? How well do you know each other? Or maybe you know each other too well because it's a sibling, it's your spouse, it's your best friend, and you have a great time with them, or it's your lab partner that you've been doing stuff for 20 years, and now you're with them every day. Think about those things, kind of write them down. Be mindful about how you're interacting and what that's going to be, and set some boundaries. It is a business. And say, these are the things that I'm kind of expecting from you. And obviously you don't do that in relationships, though I have seen people do it. But it is a relationship of a sort. You write it out and say, these are my expectations of what you're going to do. Here's what I'm going to do. And then work it out. Communicate. You can't over-communicate, right? You need to share those things, and you need to figure out, what's going to make that business successful and how you do it. And I do talk a lot about dissolving things that aren't working. Know when things aren't working. You will always, I had a good friend and colleague. She married someone that she knew, and he came to work for the company. He actually ended up working for her, which was a little bit awkward. And eventually she said, I just got to fire my husband. All we do at home is talk about work. So it wasn't bad, it wasn't confrontational, but she was like, I'm never away from work. So it's again, environmental, it's situational, communicate. But thank you, that's a great question. Yes, please.
There's a lot of discussion about executive demeanor. In your opinion, is executive demeanor simply having these particular characteristic leadership traits in terms of making decisions and communicating, or is executive demeanor a separate thing by itself?
It's changing. So what is executive demeanor? Right? What do you look for as someone who's a leader? One of the best entrepreneurs I know is Jay-Z. I'm not a businessman. I'm a businessman. I mean, he's made a business out of many different careers. He's got many different investments. He's a big personality. He's kind of a cool guy, right? He's from Brooklyn. I grew up in Brooklyn, right? Then there are other leaders that you look at, you know, and you say, I'm looking for this. I'm looking for somebody polished, you know, suit, tie. When I moved here, I was always wearing blazer, white shirt, pressed pants. Somebody pulled me aside and said, like I was at Amazon, they said, you're really distancing yourself. Leadership, it should instill confidence, results, and you make people feel relevant. You've got to get things done. Whether you wear a suit or a great dress or your hair is perfect, how you present. There are people who you hear the expression, they've got a boardroom presence. And that's great. And there are absolutely times when you need that. It's like the thing going over. When you're going over, I do really not care whether my captain is wearing a dirty hippie t-shirt or a suit. I want that person to go, here's 3 things we need to do so that we all don't die. That demeanor is situational, contextual. It is evolving. We are learning to be a little softer. It's not the command and control. A lot of executives came out of the military, and there are times when you need that. But people who are barking orders all the time, it's not a lot of fun. Thank you. Other questions? Yes, please.
Is there a boundary for the leadership role? For example, for the director level of leadership, is that, you know, in any case would cause, you know, issues with the boss, you know, because especially at a startup company, you know, just a small group of people, right? So is there any kind of things, you know, you would do?
That's a good question. Are there boundaries? Yeah, there's lots and lots and lots and lots of boundaries. So let's talk about the easy ones first, right? Your personal relationships, how you interact with people, being appropriate with your coworkers, that's a management function. Be smart. Do not do stupid things that you know. Be respectful of human beings. Treat people with respect. That's an easy boundary, right? You know when you're stepping over the line if you're saying inappropriate things, or you should. The other part is how people become part of your life, right? I work with all my friends, and maybe that's how your company found it. Understand what the mechanics of that from a financial, fiduciary relationship responsibility are, and a lot of that will depend on your style. If people know you and they understand your boundaries, those are important things to establish up front. Maybe you've got some things going on at home that are, you know, causing your work performance to go down. I'm not saying you need to share them, but if you've established sort of those ground rules, or you've set a way of interaction with people, and then suddenly you start acting differently, or you're always together, especially in a startup, especially in the early days where it takes a lot of work for very few people to do stuff. Understand you're going to be in close quarters, stress happens. Take time, take a breather, take a breath. There's lots of simple practices, more complicated ones. You can do meditation, you can go on retreats. You can just say, you know what, I'm going to work from home today, or maybe for the next 3 days because I need this. You get your stuff done. Create some space. Know what those boundaries are, establish healthy ones. I mean, this is something we could talk about for a whole day. You know, this could be a whole week of classes on how to establish those boundaries, but just be mindful that you're always dealing with another person that has needs and wants that maybe you don't understand, and know when not to probe, right? Watch the body language when people are starting to pull back. It's like, I don't want to talk about this. And you don't know why they don't want to talk about it. Maybe there's trauma, maybe they've got something else going on in their life. Maybe it's just something they're just not comfortable talking about. These are complicated things, right? Because leadership only works when they have people, and we're complicated animals. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, but my question is kind of like, you play leadership role, you cannot make decisions, right?
Right.
So how to avoid, like, let the boss feel like, you step on their toes, they feel, oh, you're doing too much or something. So in those cases.
So let me try to rephrase it so I understand. Maybe how to feel like you're making decisions that may step on your boss's toes?
Yeah, like, you are making decisions instead of like them, let the boss, say, oh, I should do this, but why so.
So there's a couple of schools of thought, right? There's the ask forgiveness before you ask permission. And you've got to look at the corporate culture, and especially depending on what it is. Again, if we're going over the waterfall, maybe you don't need to ask permission. But if you're in a highly regulated environment where the consequences of your actions of doing a trade, a financial trade, have serious implications and you're not sure and you've made a decision, you really should go talk to your boss. But also look at the way the boss has set up the culture of the company. It's like, I want you to get this done. And there's two ways for me to do it. I can micromanage you, or there's many ways. I could train you to do it and then say, all right, go do it yourself. Or I could say, you're competent, I hired you because you're an expert in this. Let's get it done. Give me a plan, come back, give me a deadline. That is one way to do it. So have the dialogue. If you're afraid to talk to your boss, in today's world, that's an unhealthy environment. You should be able to do that. You should be able to do that. In the military, it actually was in the 1800s. They came up with a process called, I forget the word, it's command control. Because they would say, I want you to take that hill, and I need you to do this, and they would list out all of the things, and when you get there, the situation has changed. Mike Tyson said it probably a little more eloquently. Everybody's got a plan till they get punched in the mouth. If you say to people, here's the goal that we need to double our revenue, we need to sell more widgets, we need to open offices in Oregon. I know you've got the resources, or you got most of them. Figure out how we get it done, come back with a plan. I'm empowering you as the leader, and I'll provide those resources. And there are times when people just say, I need you to do this. Again, it's not a direct answer, but those are the things where you have that dialogue. Set a framework and say, or if you're not sure, it's like, so here's what I think I heard you say. Here's 5 things I'm going to do. And by the way, always have a metric. Have something that you can measure at the end of the day and say, I know we needed 100 more widgets sold, we got 80 more sold, or we overextended, we got 120 sold. Know how to measure it. I think we got time for maybe 2 more questions. Yes, please.
I have a question kind of regarding performance evaluation. So typically, a team member is performance evaluation from the leader. How does the leader effectively get his or her own performance evaluation?
So how do you do sort of the reverse evaluation? So yes. So the question is, how does the, you're doing, as a leader, you do performance evaluations, but how does the team value you back, give you a performance organization? And again, this is a really good question. It's a deep topic. There are things called 360 reviews, where you're getting reviewed by everybody you work with. And you're getting that feedback. And by the way, don't wait, my personal opinion, sorry, do not wait to give feedback. Make it smart. You've probably heard this. Specific, measurable, actionable, what's the R? Regular and timely, right? Relevant, yeah. Realistic. Oh, it's realistic, thank you. If you give them feedback, 6 months ago, when you wrote that report, I had real problems with the fact there weren't page numbers. What report? Give them the feedback then, make it specific, and establish a metric, especially in small groups, of being approachable, right? How you can be approached. And by the way, there are some people who need different ways of learning and getting feedback. One of the CEOs I was coaching earlier this year, she's extremely detail-oriented. She does not remember anything you say to her. If you write it down, she will remember it for the rest of her born life. So, and it's always a better practice to send an agenda for a meeting. So if I sent her feedback and I said, hey, these are some things you need to remember, it stuck with her. Learn that person's style. And again, establish the rapport, and you as a leader have to say things have got to be good bidirectionally, but do it in the time. Also be contextual and awareness. If you're in a big meeting, go, it kind of sucks the way you talk to us. Maybe there was a different way you could have phrased today's status meeting, and I would have really appreciated, because I appreciate everything you had to say, but the way that it came off was maybe not the best way. And that is a catchphrase you can use. There may have been a different way to say that. Keep that one, because it's always really hard to say, that was really mean. And that makes people defensive, and you'll suddenly see this. Maybe there was another way you could phrase it. I think we got one or two, maybe one more question.
Are there common failures of leadership in early stage startups? Something that is particular to that environment?
Arrogance. And it goes both ways. You're 20 years old, or it's your first company. I'm CEO for the very first time, and I am amazingly confident in what I'm going to do, and we're going to get this done, and you didn't plan. Be mindful of yourself. And by the way, it goes the other way. So it can be the same way of like, I'm so uncertain about what we're going to do, and I'm so afraid we're going to fail. You're arrogant about yourself that you don't get it done. It's really not having the right level of confidence. Maybe that's a different way or a better way of saying it. And there is a management aspect of, well, the thing that I notice most is missing the financials. Know your numbers. You can all add. You're all really smart people. But if you're not a finance person and you have $100 in the bank and you're spending $20 every month to run the team, how many months do you have of run? I've seen companies who get to the I'm standing at the edge of the cage, and then it's like, oh, I don't know what we're going to do. You should have planned for that a while ago. Know your numbers. I know that's not really a leadership thing, but I do see it very often. Being mindful, being in the moment, because, or worse, you just get so wrapped up into it that you forget that you have a team. I mean, there's lots and lots of stories of failures and successes or pivots. Do we have time for another question? Should we wrap up? You're good. If you let me keep talking, I will.
We've got 1 more minute.
Okay. One more question?
So what do you say about micro management? I've heard both sides. For the small company, like 10, 20 people, is that really a good thing? Or
It's all dependent, right? Like I said, it's all contextual. Micromanagement in a situation where you're 5 firefighters standing in a burning forest. I want somebody to make a decision who's got 20, 30 years of experience or is special rated on whatever the tool set is. I think that's highly appropriate. In general, most of us aren't in life or death situations like that, it becomes tedious, especially in a small group. And even if you are that phenomenal and you've got 4 other people that you're working with and you're trying to manage everything they do, when are you getting any work done? You should be aware and know what they're doing. I highly recommend, if you haven't done an Ignite presentation or participated in an Agile stand-up, which is a type of development methodology for software, and you answer 3 questions every day. What did I do yesterday? What am I going to do today? And what's in my way for success? That is a great way of having a management meeting, a 5-minute management meeting per person, and then you can go deep into problems. Oh, we've got this really big bug, or I just don't know how to get this customer to say yes. Those are good things, right? So keep it tight, keep it crisp, factual, things like that. That's a great question. Thank you. Thank you for spending an hour with me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
We have 2 more speakers who will the entrepreneurial law clinic here, and we have I'm going to do a quick change. So turn around if you can.
Hi, check. Does this work? Test. Checking the microphone. How's the sound? Do you see? Test, test.
All right, we'll do a quick pivot. We're talking about when you hire a lawyer. Mariko and Ann are from the Entrepreneurial Law Clinic here at the UW, and this is our first in our series. We'll have a series for the next 8 weeks where we'll have some students from the law clinic to share their knowledge. So, pass it on to them. Thank you. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that Mr. Lawrence Turner's talk. It's very inspiring and eye-opening, I imagine. Today, the two of us are going to talk about the really basic 101 class about how to hire a lawyer and when to hire a lawyer and what to think about before hiring a lawyer. Anyway, my name is Mariko Kageyama. I'm a third-year law student at the University of Washington School of Law, and I am a student member of the Entrepreneurial Law Clinic, and along with me.
And I'm Ann Fifley. I'm also a third-year law student at the University of Washington, and as mentioned, we're both in the Entrepreneurial Law Clinic.
So today, for the next half an hour or so, we are going to discuss that really important yet basic aspects of the how to, when to, and how to work with a lawyer. So the first of all, we have to give you the quick disclaimer, typical language. Our presentation is just to share the general information, and then we're not your attorneys. We're not representing your business. So just make sure that when you have questions specific to your businesses, companies, please consult your legal and tax advisors. So this is today's agenda for the next half an hour to show you the roadmap where we are headed to. So first, we are going to highlight what big question you should ask. Primarily, whether you should hire a lawyer or not to help you grow your business. And then we are going to show that the both aspects of what can go wrong if you're trying to do everything on your own versus what can go right by hiring a right person as an attorney to help you navigate your business. Second, we are going to illustrate very typical legal issues you may encounter. And also, we're going to pick up several anecdotes and discuss the very typical issues you should better be aware of before you bump into those problems. And third, once you decide to hire a lawyer, then you're on the right track. But next, you have to choose the right kind of person to help you. And so that, there are lots of attorneys out there, but you would like to choose the right lawyer for your business. So there are several factors you would like to consider for hiring a lawyer. And finally, once you picked the right lawyer for your business, then you would like to get the most out of your lawyer because you hire that person to work with you. So you really want to make sure that you ask the right questions for that person, and then they understand your business needs. And then hopefully we'll have that remaining time allocated for the question and answer session.
So as mentioned, we thought we'd start with some the things that can go wrong if you don't have a lawyer involved in your business. So first, when you're first starting up your business, you might run into a founder dispute. I don't know if you've all seen the Social Network. That's probably the most famous example of founder disputes. A lawyer can help you either head those off or help you more easily resolve them. Another example, this is a very famous case we learned in law school. You might have heard of the beauty company Urban Decay. The way that started was two friends. They had a handshake deal. They didn't have anything written down. Eventually, down the road, a dispute arose. There was no document, no paper to point to. And ultimately, the court found for the partner that was disputing, she'd been forced out. And so she ended up with a lot of the profits of the company. And if you had written that down, that wouldn't have happened. So really, it's not only just writing things down that a lawyer can help you with, it's helping you write them down in the right way to really capture the intent of you and your co-founders. Another really common issue that you can run into is employment and hiring. Everyone's probably heard of the difference between employees and independent contractors. That's a really easy thing to mess up. The Department of Labor has 6 different factors for independent contractors, and they're all very fact-specific, very involved. Probably one of the most famous is, everyone knows, independent contractor. Independence right in the name. They usually can direct their own work. while an employee has more directions from their boss. But that factor gets even more involved. And then the other half of the word contractor, implies a more limited working relationship, a limited term, while employee you might expect to be at a company for a couple years. But again, there's 4 other factors that all get pretty fact specific that we need to drill into. If you do mess this up, this can result in a lot of cost to you and your company. Employees are owed different things than independent contractors. For example, employees get benefits, they have to be paid minimum wage, you take taxes out of their salary. So if you classify someone as an independent contractor and it turns out under those 6 factors they're actually an employee, that's gonna result in having to pay back all those wages, pay those taxes, and also the state might even charge you a penalty. Washington, for example, will come audit your company to make sure you're classifying everyone you've hired correctly. It can also interfere with some of the IP ownership. The way that the contracts are drafted, for independent contractors versus employees can be a little bit different and impact your IP ownership. And Mariko's going to address that farther.
Yes, so and as Anne pointed out, the IP ownership is a really important first question you should think about even before you forming your company. You might have heard that form like invention, allocation, how to assign the IP from the individual inventor, creator to your company. Basically, that means that if you you own the IP, whether the patent or trademarks or trade secrets or the copyrighted material, you don't basically have control. And so if you take it lightly that, we just shake our hands and then we pay for this person to develop a mobile app for a company, but actually they realize, wow, this person is, we don't know whether he's actually classified as an employee or independent contractor. And that could go really into the legal issues down the road. So it's very important to make sure in a legal agreement to clarify that who owns the IP, and if your company doesn't own the IP, then make sure that you negotiate with the IP owner to transfer those rights over to your company using the right terms. So now you learn that all that terrible thing that could potentially happen to your company if you don't hire a lawyer and if you're trying to do by yourself. But what could go right by hiring a lawyer? It's a lot of things you can think about that attorneys definitely bring you the value and resources for you. First, the attorneys can give you that strategic decision-making advices. When you hit all the major decision-making points where the legal issues pop up, whether it could be the forming a company or to seeking the funding or the allocating equity or the hiring people and IP issues, all of those require that strategic decision making. That's where attorneys, lawyers step in and give you the really great advice for you. And second, the legal counselors not only just give you that good suggestion, but actually they listen to your very specific concern, needs, and wants, and your vision and goals. So they can tailor specific advice and a package deal to you as this is a way to solve your issues, and this is an alternative option you could think about. And then they are also trained to spot the legal issues before that issues pop up. So it's important to have a lawyer, and that's a way to go.
Similarly, lawyers can help you anticipate and prevent problems. For example, the way that corporations act is through board meetings and then documenting those decisions. Lawyers can help you document the decisions your corporation makes correctly so that later, as we mentioned in the previous slide, there's no disputes later on about what happened. The lawyer is going to help you capture that correctly. Lawyers are also do things like Mariko mentioned, making sure you get all of your IP into your company. A lawyer's going to help you do that so that later there's no dispute about this or it's documented correctly. To help you deal with unavoidable issues. There will be things that come up in any company's life cycle. For example, if you're looking for funding and you're seeking investors, those investors are going to want to do due diligence about your company. A lawyer is going to help you with that due diligence process. They're going to help you organize your documents and make sure everything's been done correctly. And then finally, as Mariko alluded to earlier, lawyers will be able to help guide your company. For example, they can help you with funding cycles at the correct time for your company and the correct time in funding trends. So all these ways that lawyers are going to be able to help you. So on this slide, we wanted to highlight some common issues that startups will face. It's a quick disclaimer before we get into it. This is going to really depend on your company and your circumstances. A lot of these could very rapidly change. For example, I want to point out corporate formation, which we put a little bit lower on the slide. If it's you and a friend, a corporate formation can be pretty easy. But for example, if you're spinning out from a company, that can get more complicated as you're forming your new corporation. If you're coming from a university, there can be tricky IP issues that will impact your formation. Or if you and a friend are coming from, let's just say Microsoft, and you're all leaving to start your new company, there can be issues with your employment agreements. Who owns that IP? Did you make it at Microsoft or not? Things like that. So Microsoft also might not want you to solicit your friends who work at Microsoft. So it can get a little bit more complicated, even though we've got it pretty simple down here. Also, I want to flag equity allocation. That can be pretty easy, but again, it can get rapidly more complicated. I don't know if you guys watched that HBO show, Silicon Valley. Where, for example, Richard goes to a meeting with an investor. He's forming his own company, and he doesn't know what a cap table is. A lawyer could have helped him make that before the meeting and head off a problem. And Mariko's going to address some of the IP issues on this slide as well.
So as this spectrum shows that, again, that your business circumstances fall into any dot in this graph. But say, for example, your startup don't own IP at all, but start creating the IP from scratch. Then that's when you should start thinking about, again, that how to transfer the ownership from the potential inventor to the company, or that when you hire someone and then who contribute to that to your company to create the IP, then in that employment agreement, you should indicate what the deal is in terms of the IP assignment. And whereas if your company is already has a brand name service or the brand name products, and you already have owned the patent, for example, then your situation is completely different from the first situation. You may want to start commercializing those IP based on the IP assets you already own. And then you start negotiating with your business partners and develop the commercial agreements. And also, you would like to start thinking about, how to maximize your IP assets value by strategically using that IPs in your business development.
So now you're at the point where you've identified one of these issues on the chart, and you think it's time to hire a lawyer. So here are a few of the logistical things you might want to think about. At the top, we put fee arrangements. Cost is often the most important factor for a lot of people. You've probably heard that lawyers are generally paid by the hour, but there are alternate fee arrangements. So when lawyers talk about these alternate fee arrangements, we mean things like equity. Sometimes firms, especially on the West Coast, will take equity in your startup. They'll also do capped packages. So you'll say up to a certain amount, we'll do this work, and if it gets more complicated, we can renegotiate. And then finally, you can do flat fees. Sometimes a lawyer might say, okay, I'll incorporate your company for $2,000, just as an example. So it's often these smaller startups when your company is new that you can get one of these alternate fee arrangements, but as you get more complicated, you'll probably move to hourly. Just as a very rough guideline, after about a round or two of VC funding, a firm will probably move you to an hourly arrangement, just because your company is growing, you're getting bigger, you're more complicated.
So in addition to the fee arrangement, another big question you would like to ask potential future lawyer to work with you is that, so what's your experience in particular field? For example, that have you previously worked with the startups businesses like what we're trying to do? Experience doesn't necessarily mean how many years in the practice of law. Obviously, the hundreds of lawyers out there with 20, 30 years of experience in general practice of law, whereas some younger attorneys may have much less experience. However, when you have a particular legal issues, such as, say, cryptocurrencies or artificial intelligence or the new technology, high technology involved, then perhaps those younger attorneys with few years experience with those new emerging legal area of law might be more comfortable working with you than seeking advice from the senior partners with the 20 years of experience. So just another consideration.
Another thing you might want to think about is the resources your lawyer has access to. If they're in a bigger firm, their firm might have offices in more places. And for example, if you incorporate in Delaware and they've got an office there, that can be really handy. You also want to think about, are there people in their firm they can ask different questions to? For example, the lawyer incorporating you and helping you issue equity is probably not the same lawyer that's going to help you with your patent down the road. And it's definitely not going to be the same lawyer that helps you if you have any immigration issues going on. So lawyers have different areas of expertise, and you want to know if they have a subject matter expert that they can consult. Similarly, this relates to the next point, connections. Not only connections to lawyers in their firm, outside their firm to help you with these different legal issues, but you want to know if they have connections to maybe investors in the community or other folks they can ask to help you out, like board or other advisors.
So in addition to the logistical aspects of the hiring lawyer, definitely you would like to think about the soft factors, that basically that someone who are going to work with you as a business partners. So you would like to double check that the person you're speaking to really understands your business needs. Are you comfortable communicating with this person? Especially if you're targeting audience, customers base is a minority community, for example. Does this person really understanding this minority, community's needs and wants? It's a really good, important question to ask. In addition, you also think about the lawyer as the part of your team members and how to build that team. And when you ask questions to the lawyer candidates, it's important to check with that person that who are you going to bring in to our team? Just you as a partner or associate lawyer? How to split up the time and resources between the lawyer team to help us doing the documentations and checking that the business performance, so that bring in the potential investors. So those are another important questions you would like to address.
Next, you might want to think about your lawyer's reputation in the community. Do other lawyers like working with this person? If you're, for example, if someone's going to buy your company, you've been very successful, is your lawyer going to work well with the buyer's lawyers? If your lawyer is really antagonistic and people don't like working with them, that's going to be more time, more expense for you. So think about how they work with others in the community. That'll also be important, for example, if they need to bring in a subject matter expert on some issue. You want to make sure they have a good working relationship. Similarly, if this is important to you, you might want to ask about their involvement on like boards of nonprofits or other pro bono activities they do if that's something that you value. And then finally, you want to know how attentive this person is. You're really making sure that your communication styles match up. If you are the kind of person who wants to pick up the phone at 3 a.m. and have a phone call with your lawyer, you better make sure that matches up. Or if you are a little bit more into going home at 6 and having dinner with your family, you can also make sure that your lawyer's style matches up with that. So really, now that you've considered all these things and you've hired your attorney, you want to make sure that you're getting the most value. First, a lawyer can be a trusted confidant for you. You might have heard of attorney-client privilege, and so the things that you tell your lawyer are going to be confidential. That makes them a really valuable person to have really hard conversations with if you need to. If you're having any conflicts in your company, you have concerns about your IP litigation is coming up, you can have all these tough conversations with your lawyer. Similarly, we've touched on how a lawyer can be a great strategic advisor for you. They've got experience with businesses like yours. They know the funding cycles. They know who's funding what right now. They can give you a lot of great advice. And because of that confidentiality, it's all secure.
And we're wrapping up our presentation, but you want to take away today from us that you really want to hire an attorney that at the really critical juncture of your business decision making, starting from that actually the forming your business company, how to allocate equity, when you start hiring people, and then you have to work with the IP. And those are important critical junctures you really want to seek that lawyer's advice. And then once you hire attorney, it's they are there to answer your questions. But it's also that important to remember that when you anticipate any legal issues or the risk you have to face, it's better to seek consultation sooner than later, because again that addressing the issues and prevent the issues from becoming worse, that it's much better than fixing the problems later. That if you leave that problems open, that will come back and haunt you. So these are really important points that you should take away.
So real quick, before we open it up to any questions, we do want to plug the Entrepreneurial Law Clinic. As we mentioned in the beginning, both Mariko and I are students in the clinic right now. As a brief overview for the clinic, we usually serve very small businesses pro bono. So people come to the clinic, they apply, they have a meeting with students as well as the student supervising attorneys who are experienced in the area. They meet, we ask you questions about your business, and then we identify legal issues for you, how to solve them, and then next steps. So you can find us at our website or the other info on the slide. And we just want to thank you again all for coming. And if you have any questions, we'd love to take them now.
Thank you.
Yeah, in the back.
Is there a place online where you can go to see the rating of a lawyer? Like I don't know if there's a website or just something beyond kind of what previous, something that kind of rates them beyond kind of their credentials, in terms of how they were with their customers and that kind of stuff.
Sure. So the question was if there's online rating services for lawyers. And there are. There's services. I know there's one called Avo. And it can be, so it exists, but it can be hard to tell how accurate that information is. And so I don't know if it should be your last stop when you're searching for a lawyer, but could be a first stop. And they certainly exist.
Yes, I hear that the horrible thing about Avo. So I don't personally recommend, but sure, there are a lot of online resources to sort of give you the initial sense of that how that legal market looks like when it comes to your particular specific legal questions or the needs. But again, I think that do your own homework and then trying to obtain the more trustworthy source of information. I cannot pinpoint where they are, but certainly that some of the discussion we discussed, topics that we discussed that hopefully get you started.
I guess there is a more trustworthy source. I'm sorry, I didn't recall off the top of my head, but the Washington State Bar Association, so that's all the lawyers in Washington. You can go to their website, and they do have a lawyer referral service, and so that's another way to start, because then it's kind of it's a more collected list, and I think it's a little bit more trustworthy if you go through the State Bar Association. Yeah.
I'm wondering how the Entrepreneurial Law Clinic feels about form banks online. I know that Warwick and a couple of other places collect, say, incorporation paperwork, and people can just basically download that paperwork, put the right names in, and then send it to Delaware to incorporate themselves. Is that a good idea? Bad idea? Maybe a good idea? Bad idea?
Yeah, Yeah, so this is the question was, how does the Entrepreneurial Law Clinic feel about form banks online? It's a good idea, bad idea, and I'm gonna give you the very lawyer answer of it depends. The clinic currently does not have any form banks, and I think the reluctance to do that is kind of as we showed you on that chart. It can be sometimes an issue like incorporation can be easy, but it can be really hard. And so an online form bank can't capture all the circumstances of your company and and just the facts of what's happening. So we'd really prefer that you come in and have a chat with us and apply to the clinic and really get that more personalized service. And I think our supervising attorney has a thought also.
So like we're making a initial contact with a firm. I mean, like all the major firms have websites, and so you can kind of like decide which one to initially approach based on the entire firm or based on particular like attorney bios. Do you recommend choosing a firm based on the reputation of the firm, or like trying to pick somebody specifically based on a bio?
This is not the lawyer's advice or the legal advice, but I think that both approaches are, I think, appropriate. The firm's reputation is a big factor, especially that the firm's reputation in terms of their resource that they can offer for this particular industry or the community. Seattle, that the startups community, they totally understand that, or the one firm's branch office is happen to be in Seattle, but they don't really have a close knit tie with the startups community here. Then perhaps that's not the right choice for you. Also, that the individual attorney's bios are really important areas to check out. And then oftentimes that the law firm's websites can provide that list of the partners and associates, and then with their biography and the strength and the previous experiences, the major cases they worked on. So those are the area that you would like to research further.
So is it appropriate to just contact an associate directly? Do you need to contact the main number or one of the partners? Or if you see an associate bio that seems to have, looks at first glance to be a good fit, can you just directly contact that associate?
I think Kari has some input on this.
Yeah, so this will probably vary by firm. I would be utterly flattered if you reached out to me. I'm one of the associates, but I would immediately direct you to one of our partners. Partners are very responsible. I mean, they bring in most of the clients and run the business. I think what would probably make sense if you do see an associate that you want to work with is to reach out to one of the partners in the group and mention that you're interested in that associate's experience, and they can come to a meeting or something. And I could also address your earlier question about,
Any other question? All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.